Welcome everybody to the first inaugural Kung Fu Comics panel. I'm Kurtis Fujita with Patrick Lugo here, and we are going to go ahead and talk about comic books and martial arts, specifically Kung Fu in them. So we're just going to go ahead and start by introducing ourselves. So Patrick, maybe you could go and share a little bit of information with everybody about who you are, your background, and how you fit into the whole Kung Fu comic landscape.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Curtis. My name is Patrick Lugo. Online, you can find me as Plugo on various platforms. Got my start in comics early in the 90s for an independent publisher called Double Edge Publishing. But I left New York and made my way to the West Coast to become art director for the magazine Kung Fu Tai Chi, where I worked for over 20 years developing it into a mainstream publication before its demise just last year due to the COVID crisis. Since then, I've worked also on nights and weekends illustrating comics and other media, children's books, and record album covers most recently. So that's where I'm at now.
As I mentioned, I'm Kurtis Fujita, and my background is actually, I started out in the comic books back in the early 90s with Malibu Comics, and that was out in Los Angeles area, working on the Ultraverse and Protectors line of comic books. I was an editorial assistant, and then I moved on to doing coloring for comic books, and I've also worked in animation, video games, things like that. Also, I am a Kung Fu instructor, so I have a school, Tiger Crane Kung Fu, and so I kind of have these two separate paths that I've kind of converged lately with this whole martial arts and comic books thing. And so nowadays, I'm the creative director at Silverline Comics, and I'm working on my own Kung Fu comic book series called Shadow Ghost. So the tagline is, "It's the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master." So that's my pedigree. So Patrick and I know each other through Kung Fu Tai Chi magazine and our mutual friend, colleague, Jean Ching. And so, I've been a big fan of the magazine for decades. It's one of the things that inspired me to kind of take up doing Kung Fu. And if I remember correctly, Patrick, didn't you used to have, like, in the back of a couple issues, you had a comic book in some of the issues or some pages? Is that right?
That is true. It's a comic series called Tiger's Tail, which was pitched as a kind of answer the questions that young readers have. And so they kind of connected me with a few martial arts scholars. But as the series progressed, I was given more latitude to build more of a story and pursue my own interests. And that lasted for a handful of years. Then at around the turn of the century, here I am dating myself, we kind of put it on the shelf, hoping to develop it as an online cartoon, a web series at the time, but that kind of put it into a bit of a developmental limbo for a number of years until I was recently able to put some time and energy back into it, and I'm now developing it as a middle grade graphic novel series for young martial artists and young readers of all ages.
That's great. Yeah, I specifically remember that reading those in the issues back then, and it was really cool. Working at Kung Fu Tai Chi magazine, I think we kind of spoke before about this, but you had exposure to, like, the craziest amount of authentic martial arts and masters and just people from all over, right? It's like the best reference that you can get, I would imagine.
It was truly amazing to see the level of expertise that was on display, and just in the most minimal ways. You had these masters who had these amazing stories, surviving the Cultural Revolution, these longevity masters who, could do things in their 80s that I could never do in my 20s or 30s, Mm-hmm. So that side of things was amazing. And then because of the convention of magazines, where it's so much about it was like the how-to aspect, step one, do this, step two, do that. a lot of my knowledge of sequential art and a lot of my previous schooling and storyboarding really just kind of became so useful to like try and convey the lessons that a given author was trying to impart, but also like while working with the masters live and actually doing photo shoots with them and just trying to really like focus specifically on capturing the images as though it was a comic panel. You know, we had a photographer whose job it was to capture the image and keep everything in focus. But my job was just to really try and anticipate how many panels a sequence of actions could be broken down into for the sake of clarity for the reader, but then also in the back of my mind would be like the dramatic impact and, you know, when you could, you know, a lot of the lessons that any art school student would be challenged to convey, such as clarity of motion, or when to actually take an image and flip it 180 degrees, right? The infamous 180 degree line. You know, so there would be all those kind of considerations that would have to happen while this martial artist was trying to convey their lesson and try and like, you know, really prove to us, not that he needed to prove to us, but there would often be that level of enthusiasm, you know, and they'd want to show us this is how the Kung Fu is done. And
what were some of your first introductions to martial arts in the comic book format? Which ones kind of were out there or influenced you, or do you kind of recall?
For comics, it was it's, you know, there's like the different stages, but I mean that's part of my thinking has been that since ninjas first appeared in X-Men in the 80s,
yeah,
right? Or like the whole Frank Miller
Daredevil,
his Daredevil run also in the 80s were like, you know, hitting the pop culture right at the same time as like that 80s American Ninja resurgence was happening. But I mean, you could say the same thing with like my older brothers had copies of like Master of Kung Fu, or like the black and white Epic magazine versions that were a little more mature, called like Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, you know, which were much more like explicitly like Bruce Lee homages or even rip-offs. You know, I can even, you know, if I share my screen, I can.
So let me make sure I got you. There we go. I just switched the options.
Here,
oh
look
gosh,
at this.
look at
Charlton
that
Comics.
Charlton
you know,
had a kung fu had a what was it, Yang or Yang? Did you ever see that Yang, the Master of Kung Fu series, which was really good?
Yeah, I vaguely recall that, but I mean this one just looks so much more like the Roy Thomas style magazines.
Yeah.
But then, you know, you look at like Marvel Team Up, Sons of the Tiger, you know, so, right, this was, I mean, that's Chuck Norris, Jackie Chan, and, you know, help me out with the third name. I'm missing
Jim Kelly.
Yes. You know, and so, I mean, I remember this. I remember, of course, Iron Fist. I don't think I had one of those here. But yeah, so in terms of early influences, it just like, it was like the comics and like the pop culture were already side by side. You know, I was reading the comics at the same time as I was watching Black Belt Theater on a Sunday afternoon. You know, so they just kind of always were there parallel, but then they would, you know, every handful of years there would be a resurgence, right? Like the Daredevil, you know, Frank Miller era, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you know, and I think we're kind of facing one now with this like epic, you know, insurgence of martial arts themes in comics.
Yeah, that's the wave that I'm hoping to catch a little bit of, you know, and it's for me it was definitely like Frank Miller's run on Daredevil was like amazing. And what really originally I think was one big thing was Larry Hama's work on G.I. Joe with Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. And this was really cool. And then of course, when I got into like manga and Japanese anime and stuff like that, I don't know if you're familiar with Fist of the North Star. That was
Yes.
Absolutely insane. I mean, I remember I had a friend from Japan, and it's before those books got localized. And I was showing him an X-Men comic book, and I was saying, well, Wolverine's the toughest guy out there. And he said, there's a guy that can touch somebody with his index finger and make their entrails explode. And he started showing me this. And I was like, is this like, what type of comic books? He goes, for kids. The kids love it, And the funny story he told me is that they had in Japanese school, they had to teach you typing. They had a program where you had to type the letters fast enough on the computer. And if you typed the word out fast enough, the Kenshido character would actually hit the person's pressure points and their stomach would explode. And that was in grade school, for the kids to help them learn how to type. So
amazing. I do remember Fist of the North Star.
Yeah.
But I was exposed to that first on VHS tapes through the anime, where we were, once again, I was in art school, so we were like spearheading a college newspaper comic revival, where we just basically took the local college newspaper and just focused it all on comics. So like it was 4 pages of news, which was like a dust jacket, to like this 16 pages of newspaper sized comics that we all like contributed to.
That's awesome.
We each had our own series, we'd each write our own article, we'd interview luminaries of the time, whoever we can get a hold of,
And I think that's kind of the thing that I love about the art form, right? Is, of course, varying degrees of success, right? And varying degrees of ability. But like, when we do our Silverline comics live streams and stuff like that, right? And we're talking to people, we get people chiming in and saying, I even have friends say, I want to make a comic book. So, I want to pitch this idea and then maybe the company will do it. And nothing's stopping you from doing it. In fact, usually most companies will say, go ahead and make it and then come back to us, right? But it's one of those great art forms that, if you have the will and the time, you can make it. You don't need a camera. You don't need a big computer. You just need a pen and paper, really, and that's what's so great about it. Yeah.
Right. And that, once again, perfectly ties us back to the theme of like, Kung Fu, because that's the exact parallel, right? It's about the whole getting it done a page at a time, So like, as a Kung Fu master yourself, you probably had to describe that method of Kung Fu being a thing that you build over time with discipline. It's not like this quick thing.
Yeah, and it's inch by inch, right? I find working on Shadow Ghost, it's like, and I don't know if maybe it's just me, right? But it's like every panel is its own separate challenge. Every panel is its own reward. I love that kind of microcosm, macrocosm aspect to it. It's not one picture; it's many little pictures, and that's.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what. Well, let me put it. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
How does one convey Kung Fu in a fight scene that is different than conveying the lack of Kung Fu in a fight scene? But that is just like drawing a bad fighter.
You mean how like what would be my approach to kind of depicting that, like in my own work, kind of, or?
Well, I definitely want you to look at it within the context of your own work, but I think like okay, let me dial it back.
Okay.
For all of its greatness, the Batman Adam West Batman TV show created the cliche of bang, pop, wham.
Yeah.
And that became like a shorthand to convey action.
Sure.
And then you have comics where comics is so much about the shorthand, right? You only have X number of pages to convey information. So then how does an artist use that shorthand to differentiate a fighter known for their Kung Fu, like Shang Chi or Iron Fist, or like over in DC Comics, you have Batman and Richard Dragon.
Yeah.
So what would an artist have to bring to differentiate those characters from, say, your Incredible Hulk or your Superman, who doesn't need to have any martial skill whatsoever?
Well, I mean, that's interesting because I would say, it all depends on, of course, on the artist. But my view of it is, I kind of think of it a little bit differently than the way it's already been depicted. But usually, it's depicted a lot of times. The expertise is by how many people they can take on at once, right? Usually, you have a great splash page of Iron Fist, and he's doing like a jumping sidekick on one guy and disabling another guy's weapon because they're trying to depict all these things in one panel, So I'd say that's usually the case, is the multiple opponent thing is usually the way I've seen it depicted, But for me personally, what I'm trying to do, because I have some, storyboarding background and stuff like that, and, teaching Kung Fu, I specifically chose when I'm doing Shadow Ghost to use smaller panels. It's almost like a little bit more like in line with like Watchmen and Dave Gibbons' work on that, where it's very classical, because to me, it's more about the context of panel to panel to panel to panel and showing the continuity of movement as somebody who does Kung Fu, which is kind of counter to how it normally is depicted. Normally, it's about the spectacle of it, and so it's usually about a big panel, big posing, things like that. So that's kind of my take on it. What about you? How do you see that dilemma?
Yeah, I think you conveyed it really well in terms of the concept of breaking down the panels. I mean, I think that's an ongoing riddle. Like, yes. I could name and I actually can't even name the artist now, but like I just was reading the most recent issues of Black Widow.
Okay.
Right, the Miss likes to read it too, so it's one of those like bring the family together comics. Yeah. But the artist, whose name is totally escaping me, has been bringing back how would you describe it? It's almost like a single double page spread, one setting, and then it's just the entire choreography is just moving across that one double page spread with multiple drawings of the character. Sure. Jumping, and in this case Black Widow, using the furniture and dodging and fighting and taking on once again multiple opponents over the course. But I think it was just like the beauty of it is the use of space as well, like in terms of like planning out how the character Black Widow, another excellent martial arts character, is using space to fight, so it's almost the opposite, because it's just one giant panel. Yeah. But it's just the fact that it's planned out so meticulously so that you could just, see it as though it was one continuous shot.
Definitely. I mean, that's what I love about comic books is it's a very active participation you have as a reader. And I would venture to say than most other art forms, like, usually when you see film or TV, it's just kind of fed to you, right? This is how I want you to see it. This is how I want you to interpret it, more or less, at least visually. But in comic books, the way that the eye is trained to follow the movement, like what you're talking about, reminds me of Frank Miller's work, right? Well, we'll have like Daredevil doing somersaults and, all this stuff on the page. And your eye actually becomes the camera pan, right? It pans across and, so yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, it really is, to see how people solve those problems, and engage the reader, definitely. And
yeah. It's also interesting to see, like how closely a given artist is paying attention to those details. Like I think of the manga series Akira. Oh God, I love that book. And how one thing that always stuck out for me about that manga series was and it wasn't like there was a lot of punches being thrown in that series, but very often you never saw the punch. You always saw like a fraction of a second after the punch, and the face being distorted and the little spark of impact, and how much more effective that was because you were experiencing the impact of the punch rather than seeing the depiction of a punch in like a Jim Lee style pinup or something.
No, as somebody who's trained martial arts for now, it's been a couple decades, and who has gotten punched in the face, that's usually how it is. You get hit and you kind of realize it afterwards, right? You get hit and your head snaps to the side. and that's when it dawns on you what happened. So I think in that visceral nature, you're totally right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, fond memories of seeing that movie for the first time. You know,
Did your jaw hit the ground?
Oh yeah, just all of it. You know, just going to like a big, the theater in Chinatown in New York City, just to be like, we gotta see it. You know.
Yeah, that movie was phenomenal. You know, speaking of movies, because if we forget one of the big things we said we were going to talk about, and I know we're a little late to the table because everybody's kind of giving their 2 cents, but we wanted to give our 2 cents on Shang Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, because that fits the bill for us in every which way. It's a kung fu movie based on a kung fu comic book, and so you've seen it, right?
I have seen it.
Great. So maybe you can kind of give your little review, your thoughts on it. What do you think about it?
I was so glad that I didn't have to write it. I mean, I wanted to write a review of it, but I was so glad I didn't have to, because then I could just like luxuriate in enjoying it without having to be critical. So I think that says a lot. I mean, I think the fact that like walking away, I couldn't help but feel as though the first half of it was just a kung fu.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, like it just by virtue of the fact that a Marvel movie got me to forget it was a Marvel movie, that was a victory right there.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that it took a very, and which was really interesting, because I had the good fortune of talking to Jean Luen Yang, who's writing the current comic series for Shang-Chi. And like the one thing he said to me about it was how he is often, how can I say it? Like he really wanted to give Shang-Chi internality, right? He wanted to give him a very much a personal life and get him away from like the stereotypes of the martial artist. And so I remember him mentioning how gratified he was that even though the movie is a very different origin story, a very different scenario, they were still striving for that same concept of giving the character Shang-Chi, more than just, the title Master of Kung Fu, right? So I think in that sense, Marvel was super smart in like not even titling the movie Master of Kung Fu, and just really, giving the character his own autonomy on that level, and then just like building the character up as an MCU character rather than like an adaptation of a Marvel property.
Sure.
So I thought that was really kind of unique in terms of like, because I mean, it was a great Iron Fist adaptation. You know, like the heart of the dragon was totally out of Iron Fist. Yeah. But there was no resemblance to an Iron Fist movie. Well,
I don't know if you saw the Iron Fist TV show, and I know it's I have to give my real opinion. We got an Iron Fist TV series, but this was the Iron Fist movie we all deserved. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It transcended both, right? It became something like the MCU does not need an Iron Fist, because their Shang-Chi really slots in to capture like that genre. I mean, okay, well, what's your thought on how it went full kaiju in the third act?
To be honest, for me, I would have rather they held off for like a second movie or something to go that far. I felt like there was enough for them to unpack up to that point, and I was and I kind of got a little bit lost in the spectacle at that point. I love the first 2/3 of the movie. Once they got into the mystical stuff, I understand it's a big blockbuster, but I felt, there's a certain, for me personally, even in the comic books, sometimes I enjoyed the street level characters the most because it felt like the stakes were the highest, and because the stakes were the highest, it was the most interesting characters. Like I found, like a Daredevil story where he's fighting the Kingpin way more interesting sometimes than some of the Avengers stories, just because depending on who was on the creative team at the time, it just seemed more interesting. So for me, the whole full kaiju, monster spectacle, it didn't feel earned to me. I would have liked to have seen a couple, at least one full movie where it was a little bit more street level, and then he graduates to that next level. But I think, Marvel movies definitely have their agenda in terms of the bigger picture of what they're trying to tell and the roadmap of where they're trying to get to, and maybe that's why they did it. What did you think about the whole mystical creature portion.
I mean, I'm a huge fan for all mythology, and then Asian mythology in particular. So to be able to see, you know, a Kirin in its natural and you know environment. What was that little chicken pig thing? That was like a little pigu maybe or something like that. I forgot.
Yeah.
So I mean, in terms of like seeing those concepts realized, delightful. You know, I was getting epic, never-ending story vibes from The Guardian. You know, so
that's a very good point. I didn't think about that, but you're right. That was very similar, definitely.
So yeah, I mean, I think that was like that kind of wish fulfillment just had to be in there. You know, so in that sense, I kind of enjoyed that. The one thing I do think Marvel has a problem with is the faceless hordes, you know, like,
oh yeah,
and, you know, and I mean, it's not just Marvel, it's just like superhero movies are getting trapped by that Lord of the Rings convention of a faceless horde.
Yeah.
And so I think that's always going to be a minefield until they figure out what to do differently. And they could have done it, you know, like, why couldn't they have done a Big Trouble in Little China style, like chi projections of them as like giant, you know, holographic warrior versions of themselves to fight the demon? You know, why couldn't that demon be more like a, you know, the horse head guardian of the gates of hell from Chinese mythology? You know, like they were so close, they could have gone a little bit more into it, but then they zig instead of zagging, I guess.
No, that's very true. And I'm glad you brought up Big Trouble in Little China, because of course one of the best and probably hands on the best American martial arts movie of all time. And I think what they got is the hordes had faces. I mean, it was like a rogues gallery. I mean, they made sure when you're watching the movie and you see the hordes of people and the goons, you saw all the very unique faces, right? You saw the Al Leongs and the, you know, all those guys there. And yeah, when it's a faceless mob of kind of, you know, goons or, you know, just foot soldiers, it just doesn't, you know, I'd say when you were comparing to some of it, like when you think about Lord of the Rings, they made sure to have shots where they zoomed in on the individual orcs' faces and you could see how different each of them looked and see their personalities come off, even if it was just for a little shot. But usually when a lot of the Marvel movies get to that, it's all the exact same looking kind of stormtrooper character.
Yeah, well, you know, the most egregious offender in the case of Faceless Hordes would be the first Suicide Squad movie.
Oh my, literally, right?
where they literally were just like, okay, Faceless Hordes. I mean, I think the second Suicide Squad redeemed it because they returned to the canon and actually delivered in, like, you know, what the original Faceless Horde should have been like, you know?
And Starro, I mean, come on.
Exactly. But I think with Shang-Chi, I think it was definitely like like leaning into the Marvel formula of everyone's needs their little moment. Give Awkwafina a chance to do something with her bow and arrow, and you know, and then just a little bit of hand waving. You know, by that time, I mean, the real climax was Shang-Chi versus his father. You know, that was the true combat. So the kaiju stuff after it just was, you know, serves the other masters, I guess.
Yeah, I could have gone with the end fight being strictly him and Wenwu fighting, and Tony Leung just killed it. I mean, it was amazing to see him speaking in an English speaking role, and just see how he was so successfully able to bring all that charisma and charm and just his depth of his acting. To me, he was my favorite part of the film. He was amazing. So that was really cool.
Oh, I agree. I mean, especially considering the ignoble origins of the Shang-Chi property.
Oh yeah.
You know, like, they just knew that they had to redeem that, and you know, every step of the way, like every casting choice, I think was to that end. You know, to give that sense of legitimacy to it. You know, so to have Tony Leung be like, you know, the progenitor in there, that was awesome. You know.
Absolutely. And for those people watching that aren't aware, I mean, I think some of the idea was conveyed, but choreography wise, it was very clever, right? Which was Tony Leung's character did a lot of the more hard, aggressive styles of Kung Fu. And the mother was Tai Chi through and through. And if you understand the two is that balance of that yin yang kind of balance, I thought that was expertly choreographed and really done well by Brad Allen. I wish they would have maybe given a nod a little bit more, explain that more to the audience so they could benefit more from that philosophy of the whole thing. But I always look at things through the eyes of somebody who teaches Kung Fu. So I always want to hear them say master of Kung Fu. I always want them to say this is Tai Chi, because of course I have a skin in the game, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think of it as like, we all know that people are going to be coming to that movie and they're going to see that and they're going to say water bending, air bending, like there's already kind of a pop culture lexicon that those who know it covers real territory, right?
Yeah.
There's true Kung Fu mastery behind the choices of what, of how water bending was depicted versus air. So in a sense, like Marvel benefited from that work already being done, and they could have added to that language a little more. They kind of like played it safe. Boy, the more I talk about this movie, the more I sound like I didn't like it. But I liked it,
Well, you're analyzing it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, and. On that note about the martial arts, like that's the thing. That's why one of the big reasons why I'm doing my Kung Fu comic book is it's like, I will say this is Tai Chi. I will say this is here, and I will explain the philosophy. Like in martial arts and in Kung Fu, basics, foundation is the key, right? Stances are the key. And even in my first issue, I have a sequence where the main character is practicing their stances. And that's. Those things are important because that's kind of part of the journey that's not always told, right? I always tell my Kung Fu students that, you watch the movies and you see the training montage, which lasts 5 minutes to a music. And it's kind of like, okay, well, it can't be that hard. Well, there is a montage, but the montage lasts about 10 years in real life. And when people realize that, they're not as quick to continue the journey, if that makes sense.
It's true. You can kind of tell based on their movie preferences as well, right?
Yeah.
Like how many people will gravitate towards the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon style of Kung Fu movie, where it's the sword, the magic sword does the trick,
Yeah.
And then on the other end of the spectrum is like Master Killer, 36 Chamber, where the whole movie is the workout scene. And it's every step of the way, you see how much this dude suffers to get that little grain of rice.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly the thing. It's like, how, that's the balancing act, is how do you adapt the one art form via the other art form,
Exactly. I was joking with our friend Gene Ching, who's the I don't know if we could say former publisher, because Kung Fu Tai Chi still is available online, but the publisher of Kung Fu Tai Chi. And I was telling him, it's funny, I teach Kung Fu, which is kind of an old art form that's not easy and not always accessible for people, because it's not instant gratification, right? And I decided to supplement that with another archaic art form, which is comic books. So, hopefully 2 archaic art forms can produce something modern. That's the hope.
I know, exactly. I can relate. I mean, we often joke at the print magazine, we often joked about the perils of raising dinosaurs, and that at a certain point they're going to go extinct,
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But I mean, these things are like also labors of love, so anyone can do a comic, right? You could just write some stuff down and draw stick figures, and that is a comic, but then there's more, like, like the mission to convey more than just an action sequence, right? To convey a story, to convey the philosophies, like that's one thing. Like I look at when I was doing Tiger's Tail as a single page comic for the magazine, right? There wasn't too, like, on occasion I could squeeze in an extra page and devote an episode to like a fight sequence, 2 pages of fighting or something.
Yeah.
But mostly it was about like conveying, picking up where I left off, conveying that little bit of philosophical information that's trying to be conveyed, and then moving on to the next, the next setup.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's to be able to do that on a larger format, right? To do it as a graphic novel, more than 100 pages, there are still fight sequences, but then there's also the opportunity to spend time in quiet moments, and how many panels can be devoted to a sequence about meditation, or like how many panels can be used to convey bad feng shui as a concept,
Yeah. No, that's absolutely. I just got a text. We'll be having another guest coming in towards the end of this panel, but in about 8 minutes or so before that person comes in, I want to touch on that. I would be curious if you could kind of talk about this latest iteration of Tiger's Tail and what's coming up. If you can kind of give us a glimpse or an idea of what's coming down the pipeline, because we're about how many months out from the release date?
We are just under 6 months.
Okay.
So we're approaching 20 weeks out. So Tiger's Tail has been around since long before Avatar: The Last Airbender hit Nickelodeon, right? It was in the back pages of Kung Fu magazine, and it was truly dedicated towards taking some of the most arcane bits of information that Kung Fu masters would share with me as an aside while we would be doing a photo shoot about that specific style. I would be asking random questions about the creation myths behind their style, and they would just convey these little bits of wisdom and these little philosophical anecdotes that I would swirl away and then kind of use to inform the story of Tiger's Tail, which is really kind of the concept of, how can I say it? A tiger that doesn't want to be a tiger gets in trouble for his jealousy, and he's got to come to terms with the fact that really being a tiger is just enough.
That's
right.
Cool.
So it touches on all of these. I spent months working on like a perfect 2-sentence elevator pitch.
Yeah.
When I'm given the chance to give you that 2-sentence elevator pitch, I'm instead
telling
you
great.
everything else.
This is great.
But yeah. So the concept is this tiger was meant to be like the zodiac tiger of Chinese mythology, but instead he is forced to have 2 human adopted brothers. And so he's got to grow up watching 2 humans learn all of the lessons that the forest has to offer. But as a tiger, all he's got to do is learn how to be a tiger. That little bit of jealousy causes him to make some youthful indiscretions, which ultimately throws the Tao of the universe out of whack.
That's great.
And then he's got to spend his adulthood kind of reconciling this mistake by seeking out his estranged brothers, and together they have to go and put things right.
That's awesome, because and it just, even without talking as much about the martial arts aspect, it sounds so martial arts, because martial arts is about that inner struggle, right? I mean, it's coming to terms and confronting those things, your inner demons, and most people get into it, myself included, not understanding that, but the more you delve deeper, the only way you can get to the other side of progress is by confronting those things, and there's very few things that's more visceral, more in your face than martial arts training. You often find out that, as cliched as it is, the real enemy is yourself, right? And that's who you're fighting, and not just, even literally, we do sequences where you're blocking. Well, I'm always blocking a technique that's against somebody that's my exact same height and my exact same build. I'm not blocking up here where it's somebody taller than me. It's literally myself. And so it's that kind of ebb and flow of the tide. And so that I love to hear that there's that kind of internal struggle, in your work. That's going to be great. So
yeah, I mean, I think when I was presenting it to a peer group, and someone asked me, is it a story or is it a fable? And I could only answer yes. it's all. I mean, it's the log line is it's the Tao Te Ching meets the Jungle Book.
Nice.
So here, it's like the lessons of Taoism, and how can a jealous animal find its place in the world? How can humans find their place in the world? What is it like for humans who are always in the right place at the right time? How do they demonstrate that? Yeah. So, I mean, the story takes you to Shaolin Temple. It takes you to you get to explore various mythologies, that are behind the Kung Fu mystique, but it's really not about people fighting martial arts so much as it is about the conflict of idea. I mean, there are monsters too, so you get to fight giants and ogres and that sort of thing. It's much more fantastic. It's the whole principle is that the art reflects the internal. The art turns the internal external. Yeah. Right. So all internal conflicts are externalized on the page. Absolutely. And so that's been my job as an artist, is to kind of try and convey, what those internal conflicts would look like, and make it fun for a young reader who may just be starting out as a white belt in their Taekwondo classes, or they're, just beginning their Wushu training after school. I want it to be something that's fun and fantastical, but within it, there'll be lessons and gags and, insights.
That's what's great about the art form, is you can convey those lessons in a different format, right? I tell my students with the Kung Fu isn't the kicking and punching and all that stuff. That's the vehicle to get you to the destination, but that's not the actual thing. This is a method, and that's why traditions are important. Traditions are proven methods. It's the method to get you to where you're supposed to be, but it's not the end result, right? And in my book, that's kind of the goal is kind of to take a story that's kind of fantastical about a young man who hears about this mythical figure called the Shadow Ghost, and starts to investigate it and starts to train Kung Fu. But the goal is that you see somebody start from the very basics of Kung Fu and then rise to the point where they have a mastery of the skill, and as well as there's, mystery, intrigue, all that great stuff. But I always like it when the journey feels well earned. I want you, when you see the main character fighting the big bad guy and doing phenomenal Kung Fu moves, I want you to remember who he was when he was a young boy, not knowing much, and to take the reader along that path, I think would be fun, So I do see that our guest is here, so I'm gonna invite him in. I think he's going to be joining us just by phone, so you won't have a visual. But let me go ahead and we'll let him in here, and I'll introduce him to everybody. And so the person that we have here is independent recording artist, Capitan Walas. Wallace, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you, Curtis.
All right. Well, Wallace. So this is Patrick. Patrick, this is Wallace.
Hi there.
So we were just talking about Kung Fu and comic books and Kung Fu movies, and I know you're a big fan of Kung Fu movies, aren't you?
Sure. I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of one of the fun things is I met Wallace online, and I started seeing him have these really cool music videos and things, and it became very apparent to me that he loves Kung Fu movies because it works his way into his art and his music. Wallace, what would be some of your favorite Kung Fu movies that have kind of influenced you?
Iron Monkey. Iron Monkey is one of my favorites. Yeah, sure.
That's a classic.
Classic, sure. Yeah. I love that movie. I can watch many times,
Oh, absolutely. And the funny thing is, I didn't realize until later that Wallace and I are Kung Fu brothers. I started seeing Wallace post photos inside the Kung Fu studio that I trained at, the YC Wong Kung Fu studio in San Francisco, Chinatown. And then we found out that we're actually classmates. So Wallace, maybe you could tell everybody just briefly about how you came to study at the studio.
Yeah, I've been training there for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. Because the thing was like when I get here for the first time in America, I was living there just right there in Chinatown in Sacramento.
Okay.
And I had my background in Mexico. I was training that, and I was looking for something like similar. But then I see the studio just in front of my apartment, and I was like, okay, I gotta go there. And I started with Ken and Sifu Ray, and I was just getting in love with the place, you know.
Yeah, it looks like a Kung Fu movie when you go into that studio. It's literally in the basement in Chinatown, and it looks like being in a Kung Fu movie. So I felt the same way when I went there. And our Sifu, everybody's Sifu's like their dad, so everybody thinks their dad's the best kind of situation. But YC Wong is pretty amazing. So I think we're both really lucky to have studied with him.
He's legendary. I mean, I can tell you objectively, his reputation is sterling. He's legendary.
Yeah, and we were fortunate. Pat, when I wrote an article on my Sifu for Kung Fu Tai Chi magazine, and Patrick was there, you know, helping out with everything. We did the photo shoot, and so it was a really great day. Yeah, definitely. Well, Wallace, we were going to show one of your music videos, but I figured briefly before we do, maybe you could, or maybe better if I'll describe it and you can correct me. Okay, how does that sound?
Yeah.
Wallace's music is really cool, really interesting. You know, he incorporates, you know, not only kind of modern guitar and things like that, but he also incorporates a lot of classical Chinese instruments. But that's kind of, I don't know if I'm explaining it well. I don't know, Wallace, if you could explain a little bit to everybody about your music and kind of your art.
Sure. Yeah, I think my own art, the music, it's super influenced by Chinese culture too. And the last years, I've been writing a lot of music, and I've been learning instrument, like ancient instrument called guqin. Guqin is like a flat guitar. I always say like it's like a guitar's grandmother or even more, you know. And that's why I feel like so comfortable and so familiar with that instrument. And when I see it for the first time, the sound is so heel sound, you know. You can feel it on your inner. You can feel on your brain also. And I was like, wow, I have to learn how these instruments play, you know. And then after a while, you know, I'm just like start to mix with the guitar with some beats like California beats, you know, like so influenced by Oakland music, you know, like hip hop. And then I was like, I'm gonna try my own. I'm gonna mix my kung fu moves. I'm gonna mix my guqin. I'm gonna mix my guitars. And yeah, the result is Capitan Walas, and I mix a little bit of everything, you know. And one of the things like I love of this place of California is the diversity of cultures, you know. You can get a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and make your own, you know. And that's happened with my music.
Absolutely, it's really eclectic, but in the best way possible, from what I know. So, what I thought would be cool is if we share one of Capitan Walas's videos, and maybe you could go ahead and tell us the name of the song. We're going to show the video. Everybody, feel free to watch the music video, and then we'll come back with a little special announcement before we finish up our panel. So, Wallace, what music video will we be showing everybody today?
All right, we're gonna watch one of my favorites, Love On. I perform a little bit of hunger there, kind of a dancing hunger by myself, and the music, like I say, it's beats on the background. We got a guqin, we have guitars, like some funky guitars, and hope you like it. It's in my YouTube channel, so it's Love On, and enjoy it.
Okay, and so everybody feel free to stay with us. This is Love On by Capitan Walas. Good, very good, excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I love that video because you kind of look like a superhero, you know, with the mask and all. So that's very cool. Speaking of superheroes or kung fu superheroes with masks, Capitan Walas and I have something important to share, a special announcement, and I think I'll hand it over to him. Maybe you can tell everybody what our special collaboration is that's going to be coming up very soon.
Yeah, like you say, and I'm so excited to announce this, and yeah, it's the time. And Capitan Walas, Shadow Ghost, and Tiger Crane, we are working on some awesome together. Gonna be a music video for my next song, all inspired by Shadow Ghost comic book, written by this great Sifu Kurtis, and it's going so really good. We've been talking the last weeks with Kurtis, and we are creating awesome work, and we are so excited, right?
Absolutely, and I hope it's okay. I'll let everybody know. So the music video is filmed in San Francisco, Chinatown, and at the YC Wang Kung Fu Studio, and and features kung fu performances by Sifu Tony Wong, one of the top students of my Sifu, my big kung fu brother, and his daughter, the kung fu champion Megan Wong. So look forward to it, and more announcements coming soon, and we'll let everybody know when it's about to go live. Sounds good, Wallace?
Sounds perfect, Curtis, and for sure, we are so excited, like I said, and the song is really good. I'm featuring with Alan Jeep too, produced by Dave Schul, and it's gonna be awesome. And awesome artists create a lot of kung fu moves, and hope you enjoy it when it drops.
Absolutely. So on that note, maybe we'll go ahead and finish up the panel. And so I'm going to go around everybody, and you can go ahead and just kind of reintroduce yourself to the audience, let everybody know where they can get a hold of you, online, and also any updates or anything you want them to know about your future projects. So let's start with Patrick. Patrick, maybe you could share with everybody your information.
All right. So you can find me online at plugoarts.com. That's plugoarts.com. I have a fun little monthly newsletter that includes web comics and a few other freebies that I like to add. I've also just launched a new website for my forthcoming project called A Tiger's Tale. That website is atigerstale.com. Be sure to spell it TIGERTALE, add an A at the beginning. So it's ATIGERTALE.com. Also, you'll get monthly features there. Next week, we'll have one by the Kung Fu master we all know and love, named Kurtis Fujita. I'm very excited to I was so excited by the article that you wrote for it that I did an illustration specifically for it, which will be available exclusively for subscribers, but then eventually to the general public. But you can find me online at PLUGO on Twitter or Plugo Arts on Instagram and Facebook. But just look for PLUGO and you'll find me eventually.
Absolutely. And Capitan Walas, maybe you can let everybody know how they can find you online and kind of stay updated on all your work.
Sure. All right, guys, this is Capitan Walas, and don't forget to follow me and on my social media. I am on Instagram like Capitan Walas, Capitan or Captain, whatever you want to say. And I'm on Facebook like Capitan Walas. You can find me on YouTube. My official YouTube channel is like Capitan Walas. So, and I'm on Spotify, I'm on Apple Music, I'm on Pandora, I'm everywhere. Just type Capitan Walas and some come up. And remember, this is the guy, and we got some news coming. Check it out. Check the Tiger Crane, check the Shadow Ghost page, and peace.
Absolutely. And then for myself, again, I'm Kurtis Fujita. You can find me online. I have two kind of passions, Kung Fu and comic books. So for Kung Fu, I teach online Kung Fu classes. So you can find all the information about my school, tigercrane.net. You can also find us on Facebook, Tiger Crane Kung Fu, and also on YouTube and Instagram, Tiger Crane 805. And then for my comic book, it's Shadow Ghost. You can find it as Shadow Ghost Comic on Facebook, Shadow Ghost Comic on Instagram. As I say, it's the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master. And also I'm part of the Silverline crew. We have live streams weekly. I'm on the Sunday stream, and you can find us online, Silverline Comics. Want to thank everybody for coming, and thanks to Patrick and Capitan Walas. I'm very fortunate to be collaborating with both of them. Not only do I have the article coming out on Patrick's Tiger's Tale social media and newsletter and everything, but also Patrick did a phenomenal drawing of Shadow Ghost that I have to now work very hard to live up to the quality of, and I will be sharing that. But he did a phenomenal job, so I'll be dropping that very soon on my social media. And with Capitan Walas, I'm so excited. The music video, he sent me some screenshots of the editing process. It looks amazing, so I can't wait to share with everybody. And at the end of the day, this is what it's about: is collaborating with people with similar interests and people that are good people. So thank you guys. Thank everybody for watching. Please make sure to stay updated with us. And if everybody's cool with it, maybe we can do this again sometime. What do you guys think?
I am already looking forward to the next one.
Okay, what are you guys doing in the next hour? Because I'm
I
Yeah,
gotta cut off the wall.
All right. Well, everybody, take care. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Okay?
thank you, Patrick. Nice to meet you.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Curtis. This
Thank
was
you,
great to meet
Chris.
you, Capitan.
Hello, I'm Sifu Kurtis Fujita with Tiger Crane Kung Fu. I just wanted to let everybody know that we do have an online program that we're utilizing, not just for our enrolled students that come to our physical location, but also for students who are in other states, other time zones, other countries. It's a unique program with multiple components that really help you learn Kung Fu and Tai Chi at home during the current health epidemic and beyond. So we have different components. The first part is, of course, Zoom classes. We have online Zoom classes that meet throughout the week for Kung Fu and Tai Chi. We also have a unique thing which we call our rerun program. And what that means is we record the Zoom classes and we have an archive of dozens and dozens of videos for you to access at any time, anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection. So if you missed a class, you can go ahead and follow along and check it out. Or if you want to remember something that was mentioned in class, you can go back and watch the rerun. It's an archive for all enrolled members. Also, we have personal videos. And what I mean by that is if you film yourself doing an individual technique, you can send it to me and I'll be happy to shoot my own video with a response detailing specifically what you want to do to improve the exercise and do it most efficiently. And lastly, we even have a social club component. And what that essentially means is, you know, when you're at a gym or a martial arts studio, it's that sense of community, the ability to visit with your classmates, with your teacher after class to, you know, socialize. So we have a social club meeting. So once a week after class, we have a Zoom session and we talk for a little bit and catch up with each other and socialize. So these are all the different components that make our unique online Kung Fu program. If you're interested, feel free to reach me at my email address. It's instructor@tigercrane.net. Again, instructor@tigercrane.net. We would love to see you in our online studio. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you, and take care.